Hello listeners and welcome back to the Biznesowo po angielsku podcast. How are you doing today? I hope everyone is doing well out there, wherever you are. I'm genuinely excited to be back behind the mic after a short break. I hope you are ready for some listening practice and also to give your business English vocabulary a bit of a boost with this episode. By the way, for those who are new here, my name is Eva and I am a professional English teacher and of course the host of this show. This podcast, ladies and gents, is for anyone who wants to improve their business English while staying in the loop with global trends and real-world language. Well, dear listeners, we've got a beautiful spring this year, haven't we? It's absolutely lovely. Long, sunny and warm days, green and blooming trees everywhere, colourful flowers. It's definitely my beloved time of the year and I love indulging in long walks right now. If you have a dog like me, by the way, I have two of them, you probably appreciate this time as much as I do. Springtime walks are such a relief after all those rainy and windy days. Let's be honest, walking the dog when it's bucketing down isn't exactly a joy. But let me point out another thing. Spring is also a great time for new routines, gentle changes, and maybe even starting something for yourself. So, if improving your English has been on your mind, there has never been a better moment to make it a part of your day. I know life is busy, with work, studying, and juggling family time and everything else, but even 15 minutes a day can make a real difference. So, I'm thinking that maybe this podcast can help you make that happen. Let me know what you think. Anyway, I've been preparing this episode for ages, I know. I spent lots of time reading up on the things that I'm going to speak about today. And in this one today, my dear listeners, we are once again heading back to the United States. Oh dear, I really hope you won't hate me for this, and I hope you don't think it's getting a little boring. But honestly, President Trump doesn't give us any slack, and lately he's been doubling down on tariffs and trade restrictions like never before. The truth is there is always something happening across the ocean that's worth talking about, especially when we look not just at politics but also at the huge economic and business implications. So today, guys, we are going to dive into the topic of tariffs, specifically the sweeping tariffs President Trump recently imposed on a large part of the world. And surprisingly enough, that even includes the Heard and McDonald Islands. Now, who do you think lives there? Don't worry, you don't have to Google it. I'll tell you. It's seals and penguins. Yes, you had that right. So now we might wonder how much will these tariffs affect the daily life of those poor animals, right? Well, let's stay optimistic and hope they will somehow handle the situation. Alright mates, joking aside, today I'll try to break everything down for you clearly by dividing my talk into a few simple segments. So, if you are ready, let's get started. So first things first, what exactly are tariffs and how do they work in global trade? Well, a tariff is basically a tax that a government puts on imported goods, meaning products coming in from another country. The main goal is either to make those foreign products more expensive or to protect local businesses from outside competition. So, for example, if the US government imposes a 25% tariff on imported cars from Europe, it means that those cars will cost more in the US, which might make people more likely to buy American-made vehicles instead. Tariffs can also be used as a political tool to put pressure on other countries during trade negotiations, or, as we've seen recently, to retaliate when one country feels it's being treated unfairly. So basically, President Trump has imposed what are known as retaliatory tariffs, meaning tariffs introduced in response to what he sees as unfair treatment. The bottom line is that President Trump argues that America has been taken advantage of for many years, that other countries have been benefiting from trade deals at the expense of the US economy. So these tariffs are meant to push back and rebalance what he understands as a very one-sided system. And by the way, at this point, I would like to address a question that has come up several times during my lessons. A few of my students have asked about the difference between tariff and duty. And that's in fact a really good question, because although the two terms are closely related, they are not quite the same. So the way I usually explain it is like this. A tariff is the overall system, a rule or policy that says this product will be taxed when it crosses the border. A duty, however, is the actual payment you make at customs, the money charged based on that tariff. It's a specific customs fee that must be paid when importing a particular good. A clear, numerical amount that you will see physically on an invoice or in customs documents. In other words, it's part of the overall tariff system. So in short, tariff, the rule, duty, the payment. So why are we talking about tariffs and what's happening in the United States right now? In early April 2025, President Donald Trump announced sweeping tariffs on numerous countries aiming to correct what he called long-standing trade imbalances. This much-heralded decision included a dramatic 125% tariff on Chinese imports, while other countries face varying rates depending on their trade relationship with the United States. The tariffs officially took effect on the 9th of April, and the market reaction, as you perhaps know, was immediate. Hot on the heels of the announcement, major US stock indexes tumbled, triggering widespread concern among global investors. Before long, China retaliated, raising its own tariffs on American goods from 34% to 84%, escalating what now looked like a full-scale trade war. And this exorbitant hike in tariffs began to ripple across the global economy, causing serious supply chain disruptions and a knock-on effect in multiple industries. Economists and business leaders warned that the rapid escalation could do long-term damage not just to international trade, but also to consumer confidence and market stability. However, amid growing pressure from within Trump's administration, economic advisors, and even loyal media allies, all of a sudden, very unexpectedly, President Trump announced a 90-day pause in the trade war. And he temporarily suspended what he referred to as reciprocal tariffs, offering the global economy a brief window to recalibrate. But what you also must know is that these tariffs are not an isolated move. They are part of Trump's broader economic philosophy, often labeled Trumponomics. The belief that countries with a trade surplus against the US are effectively exploiting America and should be penalized through aggressive import taxes. So, the administration's measures included 10% baseline tariffs on many trading partners, up to 145% tariffs on Chinese goods, 25% tariffs maintained on imports from Canada and Mexico, and controversial 50% plus rates on some of the world's poorest nations like Lesotho and Cambodia. And what was the stated goal here? Well, to bring manufacturing back to the United States and protect American jobs. But as markets, governments, and businesses quickly realized, it wasn't going to be that simple. And frankly, it's really hard to say today what's going to happen next because lately decisions in Washington have been changing hour by hour, and sometimes even minute by minute. Another question you might want to ask listeners is, how do tariffs affect the businesses and the market? Well, there is no denying the impact has been dramatic. Businesses are preparing for potentially higher costs on important components. And if the tariffs really kick in, production will obviously get more expensive. Then, when that happens, obviously it's usually the consumers who end up paying the price. And beyond that, what's hard to understand is that despite knowing how these dynamics typically unfold, policymakers still move forward without clear mitigation strategies. As a result, companies, investors are becoming cautious and consumers are already feeling the pressure. And what about the stock market? Well, obviously all this uncertainty and turmoil has also affected the markets pretty hard. Stock markets have dropped sharply and trillions of dollars in value have just disappeared. You might find it interesting to know that Nobel Prize-winning economist and long-time New York Times columnist Paul Krugman has warned that no CEO in their right mind would make long-term investments in such an unstable environment. As you see, listeners, it is perplexing that despite all this visible instability, decision makers continue to escalate the situation, almost as if the consequences were unexpected, when, in all honesty, they are quite predictable. What is really a tariff war and how does it escalate? What we are seeing now is a classic tariff war, an exchange of tit-for-tat policies. Trump imposes new tariffs, China retaliates, and the US raises rates again, and the cycle continues. For example, the US imposed a 125% tariff on Chinese goods. Only a day later, it was corrected to 145%. Then China responded with retaliatory tariffs up to 125%. So the bottom line is that at some point, the taxes become higher than the value of the product itself. And what happens to trade then? Well, it obviously stops. Now, what are the real-life implications for people like you and me? Well, a global tariff war means more expensive goods, economic instability, and less confidence in the market. It also leads to many ripple effects. Countries like China have to redirect exports elsewhere. Smaller economies expect a flood of cheap goods. Trade routes and supply chains get disrupted. And consumer confidence continues to decline. So let's be clear. A trade war will definitely have serious consequences. Well, in a trade war, there are no winners, only losers, and the reality is that the decisions made by politicians today will eventually hit all of us. So we will see the effects in the shops, most likely through higher prices. And it's not just some political game where leaders compete for power or try to show who is the strongest today. At the end of the day, it's ordinary people who will pay for these tariffs. We might not feel it immediately, but well, it is coming along. And when it comes to the US itself, some early estimates suggest that the average American could lose between $2,500 and $3,500 a year because of these tariffs. Of course, the exact numbers will take time to confirm, but even early calculations show it's a big hit to household budgets. But you know what is the most interesting, or maybe the most ironic part of this whole situation? Everyone knew this was coming. President Donald Trump clearly announced it during his election campaign. He didn't hide it. He actually promised it. So, is there an end in sight? Well, not exactly, I'm afraid. Shortly after the tariffs were introduced, President Trump claimed that world leaders were practically begging him for a deal. And in his usual disapproving style, he said that countries were calling him, kissing his ass, and begging to make a deal. I know it's hard to believe it, but he did say that. These remarks were made during a speech at a Republican fundraising dinner for Congress, and as you can imagine, they sparked a wave of backlash around the world. Right now, President Trump is saying that negotiations with China are happening, although Trump refuses to say who exactly he's talking to. Meanwhile, China firmly denies that any serious talks are taking place. So as you can see, it's very hard to tell what's actually going on. One thing is clear though, and here it's worth mentioning what Paul Krugman pointed out. These tariffs aren't just aggressive. They represent a clear violation of international trade agreements, and sadly, they are severely shaking the foundations of the global economy. And what is your opinion on that, guys? Do you think this is going in the right direction, or maybe should the whole tariff scheme actually go back to the drawing board? Let me know. I'm very curious to hear what you think. Okay, listeners, it seems like it's time to go over the ins and outs of today's discussion. The vocabulary I'm about to break down for you is really useful. And not just when talking about tariffs, but in many other business and general topics too. Are you ready for it? Let's go! One, double down on something. When you double down on something, it means you decide to put even more effort into it. Instead of stepping back or rethinking, you push even harder. You reinforce your decision and go all in. It's like saying, I'm even more committed now. So you might want to double down on your efforts or strategy, double down on investments or innovations. Or you may double down on marketing, for example. Now, let's look at these examples. After the first results came in, the team doubled down on their marketing campaign to reach even more customers. Or this one. Despite criticism, the government doubled down on its decision to raise tariffs. 2. Sweeping tariffs. When we say sweeping tariffs, we mean tariffs that are very broad, cover a lot of products or affect many countries at once. Sweeping here gives the idea of something wide and powerful, not just a small change. Just like President Trump's tariffs, they were sweeping because they targeted almost the entire world. And as you remember, even islands that are inhabited by penguins. Now, let's take the following examples. Number 1, the administration announced sweeping tariffs that hit almost every major import. Or number 2, sweeping tariffs could disrupt supply chains around the world. 3. Reciprocal tariff. Please note the correct pronunciation. It's not reciprocal, for example. It is reciprocal. So, A reciprocal action or agreement involves two people or groups who do the same thing to each other or agree to help each other in a similar way. A reciprocal tariff is a trade policy tool that is actually used when one country mirrors a tariff imposed by another country. In other words, if country A raises tariffs on imports from country B, then country B responds by raising its own tariffs on goods from country A in equal or similar measure. It's a kind of tit-for-tat strategy based on the idea of fairness or retaliation, just like in this example. If the US imposes a 25% tariff on Chinese steel, China might respond with a 25% tariff on American agricultural products. It's worth noting that while this might sound fair on paper, reciprocal tariffs can easily spiral into a trade war, with both sides escalating instead of resolving the issue. 4. Impose a tariff. Very important and useful verb when speaking about tariffs or taxes, for example. To impose tariff means to officially introduce a tax on imported goods. Governments do this to protect local industries, punish other countries, or sometimes to raise money. You may find the verb impose in such collocations as impose tariffs on imports, impose sanctions, impose restrictions, impose new taxes, impose penalties, impose strict regulations or rules, impose legal obligations, or impose a ban on something. So as you see, the verb is widely used. Now take a look at this example. The US imposed a 25% tariff on imported aluminium, and many countries threatened to impose their own tariffs in response. 5. Retaliate. Retaliate means to take revenge, to do something harmful to somebody because they have harmed you first. When someone retaliates, they fight back because they feel attacked or treated unfairly. In business and politics, if one country imposes tariffs, another country might retaliate by doing the same thing or worse. Example phrases: retaliate with new tariffs, or retaliate against trade restrictions. Now let's take these sentences. Number 1. China retaliated by imposing its own tariffs on American goods. And number 2, if one side retaliates too harshly, it could lead to a full trade war. 6. Take advantage of somebody or something. This phrase means to use a situation, or even a person, for your own benefit, often unfairly. It doesn't always have to be negative, but in business it often is. Just like in the following phrases. Take advantage of loopholes, or take advantage of lower tariffs. Now, 2 example sentences. 1. Some companies took advantage of tax breaks to boost their profits. Number 2. Critics say certain countries took advantage of America's open market policies. 7. Take effect. When a law, rule, or policy takes effect, it means it actually starts working. Before that, it's just a plan, but once it takes effect, it becomes real and people have to follow it. And again, 2 examples. 1. The new tariffs will take effect on the 10th of April. And 2. The updated regulations took effect at the beginning of the year. 8. Knock-on effect. A knock-on effect is when one event causes another, and then another, and another, like dominoes falling. In economics, even small changes can cause big knock-on effects across the whole system. Synonyms for this are ripple effect or domino effect. And by the way, guys, I hope you already remember the phrase ripple effect from my previous episodes. Now let's take examples again. 1. The tariffs had a knock-on effect causing prices to rise across multiple industries. And number 2, a fall in exports can have a knock-on effect on the job market. 9. Surplus. Mind the pronunciation, not surplus or surplus. Surplus. Surplus means more than what is needed. In business and trade, a surplus usually refers to selling more than you buy, a trade surplus. But surplus can also refer to money. For example, when a government spends less than it collects in taxes, it ends up with a budget surplus. So basically, a surplus is just extra, whether it's goods, money, or resources. Example phrases: trade surplus, surplus of goods, or budget surplus. Now look at these sentences. China had a large trade surplus with the United States for many years. And another one. A surplus of oil led to lower prices globally. 10. Tit for tat. Tit for tat is an informal way to describe a situation where you do something because someone else did it first, especially in retaliation. It's like a back and forth of actions and reactions. Let me demonstrate how to use this phrase. Examples. The trade war quickly turned into a tit-for-tat escalation. Of this one, 2 competing airlines are engaged in a tit-for-tat pricing strategy. So again, when airline A lowers ticket prices on a key route, airline B quickly matches the price card. In response, airline A adds free checked baggage. Then airline B counters by offering additional frequent flyer miles. This back and forth continues as each tries to beat the other without losing market share. I hope you can understand it. 11. Go back to the drawing board. This idiom means to start over or rethink a plan because the current approach has failed or isn't working as expected. It's quite useful to know that the idiom comes from the world of design and engineering. When a plan or prototype failed, designers would literally go back to their drawing board to sketch out a new solution. In business English, we use this idiom when a project, strategy, or negotiation doesn't deliver the expected results and basically a new plan is needed from scratch. So look at this example. After the client rejected our proposal, we had no choice but go back to the drawing board and come up with a completely new strategy. So again, they had to rethink the whole plan from the beginning. And by the way, this idiom is neutral to slightly informal and works well in both spoken and written business contexts. Alright, good listeners, thanks for staying with me through this heavy but important topic. I hope today's episode gave you clarity on what tariffs are, how they work, and what Donald Trump's policies really mean in practice. And above all, I really hope you've learned a lot and now feel motivated to talk effectively about tariffs. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone who is also trying to make sense of the world in English. And if you would like to keep learning about global business topics, you can follow me on Instagram at Biznesowo po angielsku for more content, tips and updates. Also, for more information about me, feel free to visit my website www.biznesowo.pl. Thanks again for sticking with me. Please take good care of yourselves, make the most of this beautiful springtime, and I'll talk to you in the next episode. But for now, it's time to say goodbye.